So this has been one of the more frequently requested topics, and I'm about to take a bit of a break again, so I figured why not throw the loyal Magic Kittens a bone before I go. Don't worry, I'll be back in time for Shadow of the Nerd Tree. For this video I decided to include Sekiro, but with a little bit of restraint. I feel with the game having a much better combat system than the Souls games, it would be kinda unfair to just fill out the entire best attacks list with Sekiro, so I've mostly kept it out of there, but not entirely. I also feel there's a big enough of a distinction between the best attacks and the coolest attacks that I'll rank those two separately. But before we talk about them, let's get the worst attacks in the series over with. Number 15 worst attack for me is Ancient Dragon's Flying Fire Breath move. Probably surprisingly low, but that's partially because I remembered this last minute, so if I wanted to put it higher up on the list, I would have to re-record every single segment again and edit, just to adjust the numbers. Fuck that, I'm not doing that for Ancient Dragon. So trust me, despite the low placement, I truly do despise this move. It makes a dull fight tenfold more dull by needlessly dragging it out. Leave it to Soulsborne dragon fights to drag on. Number 14 is the Double Slash of Godskin Apostle. And I know when you hear Double Slash and Godskin Apostle, your first question will be, which one? He has a ton of quick slashes, but this one pair in particular stands out to me as bordering, or even crossing the line of being bullshit. And it's right here. It comes so damn fast you can hardly react to it, and even if you do and roll dodge it, the second slash is slow enough to get you right as you come out of the dodge's invincibility. But it's also too fast for you to roll dodge it separately. Now using a shield does entirely erase this problem, but I don't know, forcing players to use shields is kinda lame. Number 13 is Godskin Apostle's brother, Godskin Noble, rolling for days. I mean, literally for days. This attack is godskin awful to dodge, but even when you are given pillars to block it, it still manages to be an annoying shitty attack because it lasts so long. You just have to stand there and wait for him to be done. And he never is. He just keeps going. It looks stupid and feels boring. Number 12 is Midair taking a walk, and we might as well lump the Magma Worms into this spot because they basically have the same attack. There's a shorter version of this attack in phase 1 of Midair where he only does the rampage once. It's still a pretty lame attack, but it doesn't waste too much time. But I am just baffled by the dev's decision to make that boring attack even boringer in phase 2 by having him always do it twice in a row. It's not engaging the dodge, it's not cool, he just blindly walks forward and then back. Same deal with the Magma Worms. Please stop doing this, FromSoft, these attacks suck. Number 11 is the notorious Ebrieda's Charge. Or Ebrieda's, whatever. Little Ebby's body itself is easy to dodge, but her tentacle mess is what tends to gently touch you as she rushes by, and that's what kills you. I know some really good players have cracked the code on how to best avoid it, but for a slightly less devoted player like me, it feels wholly inconsistent and bullshit. I remember when I did Blood level 4 runs and I couldn't risk dodging the move because if you attempt to, you take counter damage should you fail. It was just better to tank the hit than even try because Bloodborne hates you for trying. Just do, or don't. There is no trying. Fuck you, Yoda. Number 10 is Iron Golem Grab. This isn't like a fight ruining move or anything, not that there's much to be ruined, but I can't not give Iron Golem's Grab a mention for its dreadful hitbox. I actually didn't end up including any Dark Souls 2 shitbox move in here, because the shitboxes are turned into an intended game mechanic. You have to level up ADP or they will get you. So for Dark Souls 2 it's just shit game design, for Iron Golem it's shit attack design. 9 is Lady Butterfly's Illusions. Before this fight you're given a snap seed that can dispel illusions, and it's a big help for that one-time use. If you don't get Butterfly's ass the first try, or she summons illusions more than once, which she usually does, you are fucked. The problem with this move is that besides the limited snap seed, there's no counterplay to it. It happens, you just have to survive. There's no point in fighting the illusions and it's too risky to keep attacking the boss. So you just stay passive until it's over, during which the boss will regain her posture. It feels like I lose progress on the fight whenever it happens. And her saying, "Oh, don't mind me, I'll be watching from above," is a fucking lie. Number 8, Waterfowl Dance. Okay, so this is the part everyone's gonna skip to, the Waterfowl Dance talk. I'm a fan of Melania overall. That wasn't always the case, but will remain the case going forward. But I have never, ever liked a Waterfowl Dance, and I don't think I ever will. This is one of the most unintuitive attacks to dodge in the entire series. No, actually, it is the most unintuitive. Over time I've learned a number of ways to counter it, most from word of mouth or looking up on YouTube, but point is, I can consistently avoid it. So why do I still place it in the worst attacks category? Well, simply, I don't think the amount of annoyance and frustration leading up to the point of mastering it ever made it worth it, because even now, I don't think it's all that fun. I think it's just okay. Whenever she does it, I don't think, wow, I'm so badass for dodging all of that, and instead it brings me back to the times when I hated fighting her. Plus, pretty much all of these attacks in this list can be worked around, but when it's so obtuse it feels almost like you're cheesing it. I don't think that makes up for it. I want to make an exception for hers just because I love the rest of the fight. Number 7 is Curse Rod at Greatwood, just the boss in general really. There's the move where he shits himself, which becomes an unreasonably long area denial move. It's like a portable poison swamp that damages and slows you down. Exactly what I want in a boss fight. He has another annoying attack where he drops pus sacks in random spots all around himself, so it's again kind of an area denial. Then there's the bullshit hitbox grab attack, the stupid spin around move that in phase 2 will have the hand slam down at the very start of it instantly, and is nigh unreactable. Everything this boss does just irritates me. 6. Deathrite Bird Ghost Flame Explosion. So how good are you at guessing? That's the only thing that will help you deal with this move. Where will the Ghost Flame shoot out? Who knows? Just guess and hope. Number 5. Rykurt's Ground Upheaval. This is one of the most bullshit attacks that's often overlooked, probably because the difficulty doesn't matter too much in Rykurt's fight. It's about the spectacle, but I think outside of this move, he does have a pretty solid moveset too. It just sucks they gave him an attack that's basically unavoidable unless you're already at a safe distance when he starts it. You can't iframe this attack, you can't jump over it, and it does a significant amount of damage. It's just straight up unfair. At number 4 we have the One Reborn's Magical Puking, and for good measure, let's add the Rain of Body Parts. The puke is far more unfair because the visual doesn't match the hitbox at all, but it's less common of an attack, so overall the Rain of Bodies has more of an impact on the quality of the fight. That ability just feels like a lazy way to make up for how immobile the One Reborn is. You just have shit spawn above you constantly at random, and they're hard to spot and can happen while you're locked in an animation. It's just complete garbage. Number 3 will be the Valiant Gargoyle's Poison Spit. This is already a gank fight that just doesn't work, due to the size, aggression and mobility of both gargoyles. But to add insult to injury, the Poison Spit both gargoyles can and will do, constantly, is the worst thing ever besides the number 2 and 1 worst attacks. It does a shit ton of contact damage on top of the poison status effect, and it spreads around the poison spitter in a way that makes it impossible for you to punish the move. You know who I really want to punish? The people who designed this fight.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Second worst attack for me is the worst ability in all of Elden Ring, the Elden Stars. The L-Beast already suffers from constantly running away from the player, but with this move it turns the tables and forces you to run away for dear life. Beyond just being annoying for making the fight feel even more dragged out, it's complete nonsense to avoid. It moves faster than you, so you can't outrun it. Can't spam roll dodge it either, and the boss will also do overlapping attacks during this because fuck you. I've heard some have managed to throw off the tracking of the Elden Stars using the body of the boss somehow, but that seems like a waterfowl on steroids kind of trial and error buffoonery. And the number 1 worst attack for me comes from Dark Souls, the Bed of Chaos hand swipes. Surprisingly, there weren't many early Souls attacks here. Possibly because the attacks used to be very simple, so there wasn't much to be mad about, just as there wasn't much to praise. Later on they started developing crazy ooga booga combos, so there's more cool attacks. But when they went wrong, they're much worse for it than something like Ceaseless Discharge hand slams that are bad, but they are just hand slams. So who cares? But Bed of Chaos rises above all the crazy shitty combos and spells that later titles cooked, because those hand swipes just seem to ignore iframes. They're the number 1 cause of death for me, and their only purpose is to shove you down the holes in the floor. And they basically cheated to make that gimmick work. And the gimmick is shit. This fight is shit. This attack is shit. But on the topic of crazy ooga booga combos and cool spells and stuff, let's look at the positive side of that, because the next topic is top 15 coolest possibilities. So these are either thematically or visually appealing to me, and that's about all I can say about any and all of them. So instead of yapping over all of them, I'll just let the footage speak for itself. Let's begin. Obviously, this list here was super subjective. What you find cool might not be what I find appealing. Maybe you really love Guardian Ape farting. Maybe that's your thing. Now moving on to the best designed attacks. There could be some crossover, and you could argue a really impressive, memorable attack is a well-designed attack. But I want to focus pretty much entirely on gameplay here, and I can give some examples of well-designed moves as honorable mentions. Crucible Knight Tail Swipe. Awesome attack that single-handedly shapes the second phase of this fight. Artorias Flips for keeping you on edge with the potential follow-ups. Radahn with his gravity waves, and all the mini-quick double slashes of Elden Ring that force good positioning. With the exception of the Godskin Apostle double slash, of course. Now let's get to my real top 15 best attacks in the series. The number 15 best attack is an inclusion from a surprising candidate to me, Dragon Lord Placidusix. I often look back on this boss as a spectacle first kind of fight, with less interesting gameplay accompanying it. But going back to it, I gotta say, Flacid's teleport lightning claw attacks are some of the best in the series. This is a good way to keep the boss mobile, who is otherwise like a fire-breathing statue. The amount of times he teleports upon starting this attack pattern is up to RNG, and the specific claw attacks he uses is also random, and each lightning claw is super fun to dodge. They look cool, have very precise timings, and huge range. After each attack he teleports away so fast that you only get a chance to hit the boss if your dodge was successful. Whenever Placidusix starts doing this, my enjoyment skyrockets from like a 6 to a 9. Moving on to another dragon, number 14 is Dark Edemir's use of Flame Breath attacks. Honorable mention to the Homing Humanities, I really like those as well. I feel like Armored Core 6 has taught me how to deal with attacks like that. I believe there is a science behind why Midia remains as FromSoft's best dragon fight, and why none of Elden Rings came close to matching it. Placidusix does have really sick mechanics too, but I'm not as fond of his or other dragon spires. That's what sets Midia apart. They're not just area denial moves that you have to run away from, and then back. You can do a direct Flame Breath attack as a potential combo mix-up, particularly if you try dodging away from him, and to avoid it you just roll to the side. If you try rolling towards him and end up under him, he can quickly adjust and cancel his combos to do a ground fire attack, and this one you do run away from. But it's necessary to keep players from hiding under the boss, and it actually can be punished. Another combo finisher has him spray fire around in a wide arc, which you can iframe roll right through. His Flyby Fire Breath is also great in that it rewards good positioning with a punish window on the boss, unlike what it does in Elden Ring. Number 13, Morgoth's Hammer and Sword Swipe. Might be a surprising pick from all of his expansive toolkit, but when I think about which move influences his moveset the most and the best, I think it's gotta be this one. Maybe it's not as fun as the Margit spin move, or as cool as his jumping spin move, but it's his most dynamic move. He typically does it as a follow-up to other attacks, especially if you try getting to the side or behind the boss, and it's a tricky move to dodge at that spot for the weird timing, double hitbox and wide range. So it's a great punishing / reaction attack for the boss. And I like that it doesn't always end his combos and he can continue his attacks after it. It's not a super thrilling move, but I love its functionality. At number 12 we have the magic spells of Manus, Father of the Abyss. They were also included in the coolest attacks, and that's not just because they look kinda cool, but they are genuinely scary for their sound design, level of threat, and how traditional dodging doesn't always work. For example, the one where a ring of magic closes in on Manus can be avoided by hugging the boss, and you can use the silver pendant to completely nullify his magic, which, while gameplay-wise not very exciting, is a great reward for the inquisitive player. Number 11, Guardian Ape's, or rather Headless Ape's Overhead Slam, is the single most satisfying attack to deflect in the entire game. Parrying this attack will stun the boss, after which you can use the spear to pull out a giant centipede from inside the ape to deal massive posture damage. I think it's top tier not only because the animation is great and extremely readable, but the sound and the impact and the reward for pulling it off is all very gratifying. And I like how the slam itself is a reward for managing to deflect some of his combos. At the 10th spot is Lady Maria's Charged Blood attacks, possibly something that ended up inspiring certain moves in Sekiro, but works just as well in Bloodborne. Except I do wish you couldn't parry them. These aren't super complicated in terms of positioning and whatnot, although the Phase 3 Flame Trail does add a little bit more of that, but it's all about the timing. And that timing is tight. She holds these attacks for a very long time, and releases them near instantly, but there is a subtle tell for when she's about to unleash. And to me that timing is so satisfying to get right, especially because you get a nice punish window on her right after. At 9 is Genichiro's inner variant exclusive Sakura Dance. Why is this attack so good? Because it basically fixes the entire fight. Base game Genichiro is fun, but way too susceptible to being stun locked to death. Giving him an attack that he can't be staggered out of is a potential follow-up to combos, does insane damage and requires perfect deflections from the player, is exactly what he needed. Though, to be fair, if they did give the Sakura dance to the OG Genichiro, no one would have finished the game. 8 is Fume Knight's Dark Flame attacks, which are the slow sweep attack and the explosion fireball move. I considered putting this in the coolest attack segment too, because there's something about that slow swipe in particular I've always loved. He uses it almost like it's a chainsaw or something, is bizarrely slow and heavy and feels great to dodge through. The explosion is great too, especially the fireballs. Usually this kind of attacks just make you run back and that's it, but those fireballs twirling around ensures it's more than just a GTFO move. Number 7's gonna go to Pontiff Sullivan cloning himself. Not exactly an attack, but more of a general mechanic, and that's going to be a running theme for many of my top picks. You might call that cheating, I call it more interesting to talk about. Pontiff will mimic every attack the clone does with a bit of a delay, which is such a simple yet effective way of creating a gank fight. You dodge the same attack twice in a row and then get your punish window. The most challenging part is when both do quick attacks near simultaneously, which you can't dodge separately, and instead have to use good positioning and treat it the same way as, say, Lady Maria's fire trails. And I think that's badass. The only downside is that sometimes Pontiff and the clone will go off-sync and do their own things. And that's not great. Number 6, Malekith the Black Blade. I knew I had to include something from this boss, but I wasn't entirely sure what. I could have gone with the Destined Death, that's a top tier contender. But in the end I decided his coolest move is also his best. Almost everything Malekith does revolves around distance-based combo alterations. If you try dodging away from him, he'll typically change his usual attack into one that closes the gap instead. And that's the case for even his mid-air self-juggling attack. If you get close to him, he lands with a ground eruption. If you keep away, he'll do a long-ranged spin attack. This altering is only a punishment if you're unprepared for it. But if you know he's going to do the long-ranged version, it's just as avoidable and punishable as the ground eruption. You just have to be mindful of your distance to the boss. And that's what makes Malekith special. Number 5, Godfrey/Hoaraloo Stomps. Particularly when he buffs himself so these stomps create shockwaves that span the entire arena. No matter how far from the boss you are, you have to dodge. It was a bold design choice, but it works because he only does the buff halfway through both phases, so you have time to get used to the timings of these attacks prior to the shockwave. And those animations are really fucking good and readable. Keep an eye on his feet, and the moment they are about to touch the ground, you dodge. He has a billion mix-ups on his stomps. Sometimes he straight up starts walking and each step is a shockwave, and each shockwave can be jumped over, and it's just so much fun for me. 4th best attack is anything that involves the Twin Princess teleporting. This literally makes this fight, and like with Placidusax, helps get around lacking mobility. I mean, they are crippled, so they kinda need it. The reason I love the mechanic in this fight in particular is how much unpredictability it adds. The two or one of them can teleport in the middle of their combos and then finish after relocating. The direction of where the attack comes from and the type of attack will remain a mystery until the very last second. And those brief seconds are the most engaging moments in this battle for me. At 3rd place we have another more general mechanic than a specific attack, Morg's Blood Flame. In phase 2 all of his trident attacks will leave a trail of this stuff on the floor, and you have to make sure you don't step in it. It transformed this straightforward battle into a fun test of footwork. Once you're used to it, you can kind of visualize in your mind where the blood flame will be, even when you don't see it. The boss is simple enough that this added layer of complexity is greatly appreciated. And it's not overly punishing, it only does a lot of damage if you keep stepping in it. But speaking of a simple boss being elevated with a single mechanic, Slave Knight Gale's Cloak is the GOAT. Gale has very few mix-ups and he's not the most agile foe you'll come across, but that extended hitbox with his cloak is all you need. It will require more precise dodge work from you, and thematically it's really unique. I mean, how many times have you been attacked by a cloak? It's kinda similar to Lady Maria's fire trails, which I also really love, so let's call this a shared 2nd place. Hers puts more emphasis on positioning though, while Gale's is about timing. Both are fantastic either way, but I know Maria's is a little more controversial. I've heard some have taken issue with the hitboxes. Never really bothered me, but I'm sure we can all agree that Gale's cloak is the best part about his fight. But of course, the best attack in the series would have to be Quinn's jumping slash... Okay, I'm kidding. If we include Sekiro, the best attack is actually Owlfather Spirit Owl Ambushes. Every video I've talked about this boss, I've gushed the fuck out of this, so I'm sorry if this is going to sound like deja vu. This is a unique attack in a lot of ways. When Owl starts flying around, you can't lock onto him. It's one of the only times where the player has to actually manually control the camera to keep careful track of the quickly moving enemy. And it's really important you do, since you want to face the boss when he suddenly drops down, otherwise you can't parry him. And if you successfully deflect the ambush, you get a follow-up attack that's either a sweep or a slow overhead slam. And should you survive that, you get your well-earned reward of lots of posture or physical damage. As if that wasn't enough, Owl's inner variant also has a Mist-Raven combo that will yield the same reward if you deflect the last hit, fully cementing this as my favorite boss in the series, bar none. And there we have it, that's my list listed. Yours might not look the same, you might have Quinn's Jumping Slash at number 1, you might have Owl Ambush at number 1 of the top 15 worst moves, and that's fine. Feel free to argue your points in the comments, and I will make sure to ignore them. And remember, execute your most powerful attack by smashing that like button! Oh, and just in case I get accused of copying Dmod since he already made a video similar to this, ranking content isn't a unique idea. I'm not gonna copyright strike Billy S for making a top 10 Earth Tree avatars video. It's just a format that's fun to use to convey your own opinions, because I like talking about this stuff. I haven't watched Dmod's video besides hearing that Quinn's jump attack was number 1, which is funny,